All right, we're back for another season preview as we inch closer to the NHL season. And once again, we're joined by our good friend from Hockey Collective and Working in Hockey, Mr. Nick Bowens, to chat about the Vancouver Canucks. What's going on, dude?
I am just happy to be here talking about the Canucks. Sometimes it's fun to not talk about a sorry franchise like the Leafs.
What a start.
Just coming in hot. I love it. Immediate vibes just looking at this team on paper. If you had to give me a ceiling for what you think they can do this year without getting into the nitty-gritty, what do you think this team's potential is?
Ceiling is first in the division, win a couple of rounds. I don't think they're a legit cream of the crop cup contender, but I think they're a good, deep team that's coached really well by Rick Tocchet. As long as Demko and Arthur Shilovs aren't out too long, they should be at the top of their division. Safely, I'm going to kind of put them how I had the Leafs the other day, second or third in the division, but ceiling is absolutely first in the division again.
So I'm glad you brought up Thatcher Demko. So I feel like we should start there because that's sort of been an issue for the Canucks for, I would say, about 5 years now. So what do you anticipate they get with him? How many games do you think are realistic for him to play this year? It kind of just seems like no one really has an idea there.
It seems to be pretty widespread. There was rumors today and yesterday that he's skating in Vancouver, so that's obviously a good sign. A couple of weeks ago, I don't think we were trending to that point, so obviously positive to hear there. Shout out to Sarah Sivian, who last year said that like, hey, he's dealing with these injuries. They have longer term repercussions, and everybody in the market was like, no, no, he'll be back, he'll be fine. And now she turns out she was right, but I mean, it's definitely a worrisome thing. Having your star goalie who you lean on for so many games, so many wins, to be out what feels like every, if not every other year. But honestly, I think they have a good enough team this year. Like I said, their ceiling is very strong. But I think they're a good enough team, kind of like we've said with Boston, Toronto, Florida, Tampa in the last couple of years, that like they just need to get into the playoffs. So if they can ride Demko for, I don't know, even 30 starts and patch some wins together with Shilovs and whoever else they want to call up, like I think they're a good enough team that they're gonna find a way into the playoffs. Keep him rested, keep him healthy. You don't need him going into a game in December on a back-to-back to squeeze out a 2-1 shootout win. Like, who cares? Give him some rest. Do right by him. There was a very weird quote at the end of last year when they asked if they were careful coming back with his rehab, and he kind of like twitched and nodded his head no and said, no, we were pretty aggressive with the timelines. And like that just doesn't sit great. Like I want them to be careful. I want them to rest him because I think their team's good enough that they don't need to rely on him like they have in years past.
Do you think last year is, I hate to use the word fluke, but fluky at all? I mean, you could probably argue that the Canucks were the most, I'll use the word overperforming team. I think everybody knew they were capable of what they did, but I don't know if anyone had them, doing what they did in the standings last year and then winning a playoff round and all that. I mean, would you say it was a fluke?
Hate the F word. Hate the F word. Don't know. I texted something similar to a buddy today, and I said like I kind of think the Canucks are going to regress. They were on a bit of a PDO bender. I think a lot of their guys overperformed. I think the three of us and everybody else with half a brain said the same thing all last season. So I do think there's a lot of potential for them to regress. But then I look at the team on paper and like I like a lot of the pieces. I love Rick Tocchet as a coach. This could be a product of just a very well-oiled machine who loves their coach and buys in. That's obviously a factor. They've got the legit number one center in Petey. Hell, they have another one in JT Miller. They've got the flashy scorer in Besser. They've got some good secondary scoring with Garland. Bringing in Daniel Sprong is a great addition. I really like their third line of Joshua, Bluger, and then it was Garland last year, but it could be Sprong or Garland now. And then on the back end, they've got some trees. They've obviously got Hughes, who's the lifeblood of that D corps. Hronek had a great season. Hope he can run that back. But bringing in Vinny Desharnais, bringing in Carson Soucy, keeping around Tyler Myers, like they've got some nitty gritty defenders back there that on paper, fellas, this team's going to win those tight games. And that's what you want to see, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know people like to say that like Tyler Myers is a little bit older now, but at the end of the day, the guy is still 6'7" when not on skates. So That's got to count for something. I think that top pair of Hughes and Hronik has to be up there, top five best in the NHL, maybe even top three.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a top tier pairing. I think my cream of the crop will always be Makar and Tays, but these two are right up there with them. Hronik had a great year. He got a great payday. Hughes has another season under his belt with the C, understanding the pressure. They made it to the playoffs. They had a great regular season. So, I mean, for me, this is a team who's got the right pieces in place to make a run. Like I said, I don't think they're a true scary dominant cup threat like I might think Edmonton, Vegas, Florida, whoever is, but I think they're right in that next crop of teams that if they won the cup this summer, we wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I could absolutely see it.
Similar to our Leafs preview that we did the other day with you, you're talking about Nylander, and now with the extension, all the eyes are going to be on him. I feel the same way about Patterson, right? Like it's such a weird season last year. Up until the end of January, he was eighth in the league in points, and then from February to the end, he was barely over a point per game. He was 95th in the NHL in points, and now that contract kicks in. What do you think we can expect from him stat line wise this season?
I think he's going to be pushing 100 points, and I think that's right where he should be. I think he is an elite talent. I think he drives play as well as anybody in the league. He doesn't have the flashy skill or power that a McDavid or McKinnon have, but he's always in the right spot. He's always making the right plays. Obviously, an overused comparison, but he looks like a Sedin out there sometimes with the Swedish flair that he's got with his puck handling and passing. I really like him as a player. Does he need to have a good, strong season after the playoff showing and some of the ups and downs last year? Absolutely. Vancouver is a livid market when their boys aren't performing. So I think he's going to get out to a good start. I think he knows the pressure that's on him. And honestly, I think he's a kid that can handle it. So I'm excited to see what PD brings. And again, I like that they have some options with their lines. They can put him with a Besser, they can put him with a Garland, a Sprong, they can stack him up with JT Miller if they want, whoever it is. They've got some good options. Didn't even mention Jake DeBrusk because I don't really like him, but that's another good secondary scoring option that he could play with, right? So Petey's going to have a big year. He's going to be just fine.
I think another one of those great options, a guy who I've always really loved his game is Nils Höglander. And you know
Mm.
that he got 80 games under his belt last year with the team. That was huge. I know he was a little bit up and down in the A the season before. Finishes with 24 goals. What do you think like a solid good step forward would be for him in production to help this team out?
Honestly, I think anything more than last year is a good bit for him. Like I think he's a good secondary option. I don't think he's ever going to be a top line player. I don't know if he ever solidifies himself as a top six player, but he's a guy that you're going to count on to score some goals. He's a guy that's going to fit in well to a second power play unit, maybe play some other special teams as needed. He's got tons of skill. He's got a good motor. He works hard. I think that's a guy that you need pushing for spots in the lineup, especially with some of these other stars and big names. I mean, I feel like I always say the word like internal competition, but like that's what a guy like that can bring to the table, right? He can push for those higher spots. He can push for those other opportunities. Way back in the day when I was working with some OHL teams and stuff, like I had a GM say to me once, I only ever want to know 10 to 14 players on my team coming into the year. The other guys, I want them to all duke it out for, right? So he wants to know his top six for the most part. He wants to know his top three, maybe four defense, a goalie, maybe a third or fourth line center. Everybody else, they want duking it out. And I think that's what a guy like Niels Hoglander can do. Podkolzin, for example, they didn't see him fitting into that competition. They have enough guys down there that they can bring up, bring down, switch around, play both sides of the ice. So a guy like Podkolzin they ship out, I think that's a good sign that Hoglander's going to get an extra look, and we'll see what he does with it.
Before we get some season predictions for the Canucks, and I agree with you on this take that, we're not necessarily putting them in that tier one contender with the Floridas, the Edmontons, the Vegases. What's one piece that you think they could get this year that might push them into that upper echelon that we know they probably could get to at some point?
Yeah, honestly, for me, I like their depth pieces, but I'd want one more forward. I, maybe not a bit as big of swing as they took with Lindholm last year because we know how that worked out. But for me, like I'm a sucker for the teams that have a really strong third center or a really strong two-way winger on the second or third line that can kill penalties, can block shots, has been there before, has gone on cup runs. Like that's the type of guy that I would look to add to this team and the type of guy that I would look to add to the room for the Canucks. So, top of my head, I don't know who that guy is this year. To me, it's like the Adam Henrique ad last year, or in years past, like you think Harry of Jordan Staal playing 3C for the Penguins. Like that's the type of thing that to me is like, oh, if you can roll three lines steady, and again, I love their third line right now. But if you can get another third line, or maybe you shift Garland up to a second line on the wing and Blueger goes to the wing there, or maybe Joshua goes down to the fourth line and now he's even more effective playing power play two or PK two, right? So some things that you can shift around when you add that middle of the lineup flexibility. I think that would be a key thing for me with the Canucks.
I think, that's a great point that you bring up, Harry. I think this team, just looking at them on paper, as long as they're in contention come deadline time, it absolutely screams buyer. Like they're definitely going to be willing to make the move, and they've shown us this in the past to bring someone in to bring someone in to help this team make the postseason and take it a step further. So, Bowens, let's say they do get into the postseason. You said 2 rounds?
I think so. I think that's probably what I see. I think they could definitely push for a third round. They're not just a one round team, in my opinion. Something went wrong if they're out in round one. It's all going to come down to Demko, like we said. But I think this team can absolutely go for a couple of rounds this year. And like you said, take some swings on guys at the deadline, right? They've got some top notch prospects with Lekari Mackey. Is that how you say it? I think
That was
so.
pretty good.
Willander at BU, right? Like they've got a lot of guys that, are going to fill the closet as they come up. So don't be afraid to ship out some of these mid-tier prospects, some of these fringe NHL guys to add a big piece this year's deadline. Again, probably not a Lindholm type deal because we saw them make a lot of those last year, even Zadorov last year. But, I think a couple rounds, couple swings of the trade deadline, they'll be in a good spot.
Lars Eller comes to mind. Obviously, Penn's
Mhm.
bias. Been hearing rumors about them trying to ship him out. Obviously, Vancouver, Pittsburgh, they have a very good trading relationship slash history. I wouldn't be shocked.
I mean, he was great as a 3C for the Caps on the Cup run. They don't win a Stanley Cup without Lars Eller. I don't think there's any question in my mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a great example, and that's a dude that I would always trade for. And Chell is that perfect lock him in as 3C. We'll get some upside on the top two lines, but him there, I think that's a perfect thing. And I think we can safely say that they won't be trading for any Russians, because Tocchet clearly doesn't see eye to eye with the likes of Zadorov, Podkolzin, Mikheyev, et cetera, all getting shipped out this summer. So whoever they trade for, I don't think they're going to be coming from Russia, boys.
No, it seems like they really like drafting the Swedes and Finns too. So clearly they've got that locked down.
They've got the Swedes on lock, that's for sure. I mean, Russia just makes sense for Vancouver. It's the closest NHL city to Russia. They should love it there, but Tocchet said, no, no, not today, fellas.
My last question, Pacific Division winner. What do you think?
Edmonton Oilers.
Good
I
pick.
think I think they're going to be hungry. I think they want to get some of that disappointment out of their mouths. We've talked again about teams like Tampa, Boston that don't need to go balls to the walls to get into the playoffs. They kind of just do what they have to get in and then make a run. Edmonton doesn't really strike me as that team. I think they're going to come out guns blazing. They feel like they have something to prove. Bouchard's going to want a big payday. McDavid's going to want a bigger payday than his boy 29. So I think Edmonton's going to be a heck of a team this year. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's those two at the top of the division.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for the Canucks. Nick, thanks once again for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on, and we'll see what this team does this year. I feel like they're going to be an interesting one to watch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, fellas.